The mountains gave no mercy. Kira Thorne lay in the snow, her left shoulder screaming where the bullet had carved through muscle and bone. The Barrett M82A1 beside her was still warm, its barrel cooling in the pre-dawn cold. 31 spent shell casings glinted in the starlight, scattered across the rocks like brass prayers answered.
Agreed, but we need to be
Blood pooled beneath her, turning the snow crimson. The radio crackled against her ear. Garrett Dalton's voice cutting through the static and the wind. "Thorne, if you can hear me, the team's secure. All 24 souls accounted for." A pause heavy with things soldiers don't say. "Thank you." Kate forced her eyes open, focusing through the haze of pain. Far below in the valley, she'd spent 8 hours protecting Blackhawks were lifting off. Small figures moved with purpose, loading wounded, securing equipment. Her team, alive because she'd climbed where no one thought possible, shot when no one knew she was there. But the victory tasted like ashes. Her scope had tracked the Russian helicopter as it banked east, disappearing into the mountain passes. Vladimir Volkov was gone. The reinforced case he carried, 1 meter long, innocuous as luggage, contained hell itself. 15 kilotons of Soviet engineering, enough to turn Manhattan into a crater. She'd saved 24 men, but how many millions had she condemned? The question hung in the thin air unanswered. Words appeared across her fading vision, not really there, but seared into her consciousness by blood loss and choices that couldn't be unmade. What is worth more than the lives of 24 good men, and if such a thing exists, who has the right to decide? The world tilted. Darkness crept in from the edges, and then, 36 hours earlier, Virginia Beach, 0530 hours. The alarm never had a chance to sound. Kira Thorne was already awake, had been for 20 minutes lying in the dark of her studio apartment and counting heartbeats. 52 per minute. Same as yesterday. Same as every day for the past 27 years, since Colonel Marcus Reeves had first taught her that a shooter's pulse was the difference between life and death. She rose without sound, muscle memory guiding her through the pre-dawn ritual. Sports bra, running short shoes with exactly 247 miles on them. She'd replace them at 300. The apartment was sparse, almost monastic. No plants that required care, no pets that needed feeding, nothing that couldn't be abandoned in 60 seconds. One wall held her only concessions to vanity, an Olympic gold medal from 12, its ribbon faded now. Beside it, a photograph in a simple frame. Wyatt Thorne stared out from the picture, forever 35, forever in his SEAL dress uniform. Strong jaw, clear eyes, the hint of a smile that suggested he knew something you didn't. Kate had studied that face for 3 decades, memorizing every line, searching for something of herself in his features. She'd never met him. Wyatt Thorne had died in Mogadishu on October 3, 1993, during Operation Gothic Serpent. His daughter had been 3 years old, too young for memory, too young for goodbye. Everything Kate knew about her father came secondhand stories told by Marcus Reeves, videos watched until the tape wore thin, the weight of a legacy she'd spent her entire life trying to earn. She touched the frame, a daily ritual. "Morning, Dad." The photograph didn't answer. It never did. The run was 6 miles, the same route she'd traced for years. Beach to boardwalk to pier and back, her feet finding purchase in the sand, while the Atlantic whispered its eternal conversation with the shore. The sky was beginning to lighten, that delicate moment before dawn when the world held its breath. At mile 4, she noticed the tail. Nothing obvious. Just a dark sedan parked where no sedan should be, a figure in the driver's seat who didn't move when she passed. Kate's pace never changed, but her awareness sharpened. Exits, cover, distance to her apartment where her Sig Sauer waited in a quick-access safe. Old habits. Reeves had drilled them into her young, and they'd saved her life more than once in places that didn't exist on any map. The sedan followed her home, maintaining a careful distance. By the time she reached her building, Kate had 3 escape routes planned and had memorized the license plate. She took the stairs, never the elevator, another of Reeves's rules, and was reaching for her door when she sensed the presence behind her. "Still checking your 6?" a familiar voice said. Good. Kate didn't startle. She turned slowly, putting her back to the door, her weight balanced. Marcus Reeves stood in the hallway, all 72 years of him radiating the kind of authority that didn't diminish with age. He looked older than she remembered. The steel-gray hair had gone white at the temples, and new lines carved his face like a relief map of hard decisions. But his eyes, pale gray cold as January, remained sharp as the day he'd first appeared at her mother's funeral, promising a broken 8-year-old girl that he'd take care of everything. He'd kept that promise. Colonel, Kate kept her voice neutral. The sedan, yours, had to make sure you were staying sharp. Reeves held up a hand before she could object. May I come in? Kate hesitated, then nodded. She unlocked the door, entered first, scanned the space with practiced efficiency. Nothing disturbed. She gestured to the small kitchen table, the apartment's only seating besides the bed. Reeves sat, moving with the careful precision of a man who knew his body's limits. He placed a manila folder on the table between them, but didn't open it yet. Coffee? Kate asked. Black, 2 sugars? She poured 2 cups, set them down, remained standing. Years of training had taught her to read him, to catch the micro-expressions that telegraphed his intentions. Right now, Reeves was wearing his mission face, the one that meant someone was about to be asked to do something difficult. You've been out of the game for 5 years, Reeves said finally. By choice. I know. He sipped his coffee, his eyes never leaving her face. The company understood. What happened in Moscow, you earned your retirement. Kate said nothing. Moscow was classified above top secret, buried so deep that even acknowledging it existed could land you in Leavenworth. All that mattered was the outcome, one high-value target eliminated at a distance that shouldn't have been possible, and a 30-year-old woman walking away from the only life she'd ever known. I'm not here on behalf of the agency, Reeves continued. This isn't official. It's personal. He opened the folder. The photograph on top showed a man in his late 50s, hard-faced and cold-eyed. European features, expensive suit. The bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Kate studied the image, professional detachment, keeping her voice steady even as something cold settled in her gut. Who is he? Vladimir Volkov, former KGB Department 12 Nuclear Intelligence and Acquisition. After the Soviet Union collapsed, he disappeared. We've tracked him through Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, always associated with black market nuclear materials. Reeves paused, letting the weight of it sink in. This is the man who killed your father. The room seemed to contract. Kate set down her coffee very carefully, her hands steady despite the sudden rush of blood in her ears. Mogadishu, 1993. Operation Gothic Serpent. Your father was part of a 5-man team tasked with eliminating Volkov during an arms deal. The intelligence was solid. The team was elite. Wyatt had Volkov in his sights, clear shot, guaranteed kill. Reeves's voice dropped lower. But Volkov had rigged explosives throughout the building. Dead man's switch. If he died, everyone died. Kate knew this story. She'd heard it 100 times, had dreamed it 1,000 more. But she let Reeves tell it again, watching for new details, inconsistencies, the truth hidden between the words. Your father made a choice. Instead of taking the shot, he warned his team about the explosives. The transmission exposed his position. Volkov's security found him, opened fire. Wyatt provided covering fire while his team escaped. Reeves met her eyes. He died ensuring their survival. And Volkov got away. For 32 years, until now. Reeves pulled another photograph from the folder. This one was grainy, clearly taken from satellite imagery. The same hard face, older now, standing outside a compound in mountainous terrain. Afghanistan-Pakistan border, 3 weeks ago. Our assets intercepted communications suggesting Volkov has acquired something he shouldn't have. Reeves tapped the photo. We believe he's in possession of an RA-115 portable nuclear device. Soviet-era suitcase nuke. Kate's breath caught. How many are still missing? This is the last one. The 6th device unaccounted for since 1991. Yield estimated at 15 kilotons. Target, Manhattan, we believe. Volkov's been in contact with known terror networks. The exchange is scheduled to happen within the next 72 hours. Kate stood paced to the window. The sun was fully up now, painting the ocean gold. Normal people were starting their normal days, drinking their coffee, reading their news, completely unaware that somewhere in the mountains of Central Asia, a man was preparing to turn their city into a grave. "Why tell me?" she asked finally. "Why not a drone strike a SEAL team the full weight of American military power? Because it's not that simple." Reeves joined her at the window. Volkov's embedded with Taliban forces in the Korangal Valley, heavily defended, no clear line of approach. Any overt action would spook him and he'd disappear again. We need precision. We need someone who can get into position without being detected. Someone who can make an impossible shot when the moment comes. You need a sniper. I need you. Kate turned to face him fully. There are dozens of qualified snipers in Spec Ops. People with current clearances, active duty status. None of them are Wyatt Thorne's daughter. The words hung between them like a challenge. Reeves continued, his voice softer now, almost gentle. You've spent your entire life preparing for this, Kate. Everything I've taught you, every skill you've mastered, it all leads here. This is your chance to finish what your father started, to complete the mission he gave his life for. Kate looked back at the photograph of Wyatt Thorne on her wall. The forever young SEAL who'd made a choice team over mission, lives over objectives, compassion over completion. Marcus Reeves had spent 32 years making sure she understood that choice had been wrong. That victory required sacrifice. That sentiment was a luxury warriors couldn't afford. But standing here now, Kate wondered, what would her father really want? Would Wyatt Thorne, who died saving his team, would he want his daughter to complete his mission, or would he want her to make her own choices, find her own true north? There's something else you should know, Reeves said quietly. He pulled one more item from the folder, a compass, old and worn, its brass case dented from hard use. Your father carried this on every mission. I kept it after Mogadishu. I think he'd want you to have it now. Kate took the compass with shaking hands. It was heavier than she expected, warm from Reeves's pocket. She opened the case. The needle spun lazily, seeking magnetic north. On the inside of the lid, scratched in Wyatt's own hand, find true north always. What does it mean? She whispered. Your father believed every man needs a moral compass, something unchanging to guide them when everything else is chaos. Reeves placed a hand on her shoulder. He wanted you to find yours. Kate closed the compass, felt its weight in her palm. A gift from a father she'd never known, delivered by the man who'd shaped everything she'd become. The irony wasn't lost on her. When do I leave? Tomorrow morning. But first there's someone you need to meet. The Naval Special Warfare Development Group facility sprawled across the Virginia coast like a small fortress ringed by security that made civilian airports look quaint. Kate's credentials got her through the gate, but the looks she received from the operators she passed made it clear women were still a rarity here, even in support roles. Reeves led her to a briefing room where 12 men waited, all of them radiating the coiled readiness of apex predators temporarily at rest. They stood when she entered, not out of courtesy, Kate suspected, but to assess the threat. At the head of the room stood a man who looked carved from granite and seasoned by decades of hard weather. Captain Garrett Dalton, according to the nameplate on his desk. 61 years old, with the kind of face that had seen things and chosen to keep living anyway. His eyes, dark brown, almost black, tracked Kate with predatory focus. Gentlemen, Reeves announced, this is Kira Thorne. She'll be serving as communications specialist for Operation Kingfisher. The silence that followed was deafening. Dalton broke it first. With all due respect, Colonel, my team is already fully staffed. We've been training together for 6 months for this deployment. I don't recall requesting additional personnel. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I don't recall asking for your opinion, Captain. Reeves replied, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had commanded special operations before most of these men were born. Miss Thorne comes to us with unique qualifications. Olympic gold medalist in precision shooting, top of her class at Quantico, fluent in Pashto and Russian. She'll be an asset. Kate stood perfectly still, letting them look, letting them judge. She'd been the only woman in rooms full of men before. You didn't survive by getting defensive. You survived by being better than they expected and then being better still. Dalton's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. This is a combat unit, Colonel. Not a, I'm well aware of what kind of unit this is, Captain. Reeves' voice could have cut steel. I was commanding SEAL teams while you were still qualifying in BUDS. Miss Thorne is assigned. That's not up for discussion. The two men stared at each other, decades of history crackling between them like live voltage. Kate watched, cataloging details. There was something personal here, something that went beyond a simple disagreement about team composition. One of the younger operators, late 20s, cocky-bearing, muttered something to his neighbor that Kate's exceptional hearing caught clearly. Great. They're sending us porcelain on a desert mission. The nickname rippled through the room in barely suppressed smirks. Kate stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly without being raised. Captain Dalton, I understand your concern. You have a cohesive unit and I'm an unknown variable. That's fair. She met his eyes directly. So test me. Whatever standards your team meets, I'll meet them. If I can't, I'm gone. You have my word. Dalton studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Training starts at 0500 tomorrow. Don't be late. I'll be there at 0445, sir. As the meeting broke up, Kate caught Reeves watching her with something that might have been approval or calculation. With Marcus Reeves, it was often hard to tell the difference. Later, as they walked back to the parking lot, Reeves spoke quietly. Dalton will push you hard. He has his reasons. Panama, Kate said. It wasn't a question. Reeves stopped, surprised. What do you know about Panama? I know your stepson died there in 1991. I know Dalton was on that team. I know the two of you haven't spoken directly since. Kate turned to face him. What I don't know is why you're putting me in the middle of whatever happened between you. For just a moment, Reeves's mask slipped. What Kate saw beneath it was complicated grief, guilt, determination, and something else she couldn't quite name. Because this mission is bigger than old grudges, he said finally. Bigger than either of us. And because I trust you to do what's necessary when the time comes. And what is necessary? Reeves didn't answer. He just handed her a set of keys. Report to the armory tomorrow at 0430. There's equipment waiting for you, not standard issue for communications specialists. Kate looked at the keys, then back at Reeves. What aren't you telling me? Everything you need to know will become clear when the time is right. He started walking again. Get some rest, Kate. Tomorrow's going to be hard. She watched him go, the old soldier disappearing into the Virginia afternoon. The compass in her pocket seemed heavier than it had any right to be. But what if true north was a lie? The obstacle course looked like something designed by someone who hated the human body. Kate arrived 15 minutes early, as promised, to find Garrett Dalton already there. He was doing pull-ups on a metal bar with mechanical precision, his breath fogging in the pre-dawn cold. He dropped to the ground as she approached, barely winded. Early, he observed. I'll give you that much, Thorne. My father taught me punctuality is a sign of respect, Captain. Dalton's expression flickered. Your father, Wyatt Thorne. I knew him briefly. Somalia 93. Kate's heart rate spiked, but she kept her voice level. You were there. Different unit, same hellhole. He wiped sweat from his brow with a towel. I saw him the night before his last mission. He was checking his rifle just like you probably check yours. Same expression, same hands. Dalton studied her face. He was a good operator, one of the best I've seen behind a rifle. He was better than good, Kate said quietly. Dalton nodded once, acknowledging something unspoken. Then the moment passed, professionalism sliding back into place like armor. The course has 7 stations, wall pit, weaver, rope climb, each designed to push human endurance past normal limits. My men completed in under 12 minutes. You have 15. Understood. One more thing. Dalton's voice dropped lower. The nickname Porcelain. I heard it yesterday. That stops now. Anyone on my team uses it again, they run the course wearing full kit and carrying their swim buddy. Clear. Kate hadn't expected that. Yes, sir, thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't prove them right. The whistle blew. Kate ran. The wall came first, 15 feet of smooth wood requiring upper body strength she had to earn through technique rather than raw power. Her hands found the top arm screaming as she pulled herself over. The pit waited on the other side, 40 meters of mud and barbed wire set low enough that you had to crawl, had to eat dirt while metal scraped your back and the mud tried to drag you down. Kate kept moving. She wasn't as fast as the men, wasn't as strong, but she was methodical, economical, wasting no motion. The rope climb burned her palms raw, but her grip never faltered. The weaver demanded precision over speed, threading through barriers while your lungs begged for rest you couldn't afford. When she crossed the finish line, her uniform was shredded and muddy, her hands bleeding, her body one long ache of protesting muscle. 14 minutes, 43 seconds. The SEAL team watched in silence as Dalton checked his stopwatch, nodded once. Again, same time tomorrow. It was the closest thing to approval she was going to get. The rifle qualification came after lunch. The range had been set up with human-shaped targets at varying distances, 100 to 800 yards. Each SEAL would run 400 meters, then drop into firing position and engage the targets in sequence, all while the clock ran and the pressure mounted. Kate watched them go one by one. They were impressive, no question. 80–90% accuracy, smooth transitions, professional execution. These were men who'd been doing this their entire adult lives. When her turn came, she stepped to the line and felt the weight of their skepticism like a physical thing. The whistle blew. Kate ran, her lungs burning, her legs pumping. She dropped into position behind the M4 carbine, her hands finding their places through muscle memory older than conscious thought. Marcus Reeves had started her training at 8 years old. By the time other kids were learning algebra, Kate could calculate windage and elevation in her head. While controlling her breath and heartbeat, she began firing. Center mass, headshot, center mass, headshot. The rhythm was meditative, almost peaceful. Each target received exactly one bullet placed with surgical precision. Her breathing stayed controlled, her movements minimal. In the zone where thought disappeared and only execution remained, Kate was home. When she finished perfect score record time, the range fell silent. Even Dalton looked impressed, though he tried to hide it behind professionalism. Again, he ordered. She ran the course again, same result. Lieutenant Cole Brennan, the operator who'd coined the Porcelain nickname, whispered to Dalton loud enough for Kate to hear, "I've never seen shooting like that, not even from you, sir." Dalton's jaw tightened. She can shoot paper. Field conditions are different. He was right, and Kate knew it. The stress shooting course proved his point. They moved to the SEAL team's live fire maze, a nightmare of smoke, strobe lights, and blaring heavy metal music. Instructors fired blanks near the shooter's ears. Targets appeared and disappeared in rapid succession, some civilian, some hostile. The chaos was designed to simulate combat, the confusion, the fear, the split-second decisions where hesitation meant death. Here, Kate's performance declined sharply. The sensory overload broke her concentration. Her timing faltered. She hit only 60% of her targets, the worst score of the day. When she finished, Dalton was waiting. That's the difference between the range and reality, Thorne. Out there, everything is chaos. Olympic shooting doesn't prepare you for that. Kate accepted the criticism without excuses. "I'll work on it, sir. See that you do." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Your father never missed, not even under stress." The words cut deeper than he probably intended. That night, Kate sat alone in her quarters, field stripping an M24 sniper rifle. The weapon wasn't part of her official equipment as a communications specialist, but it had been waiting in the armory just as Reeves had promised. She worked by muscle memory, her hands moving through the familiar ritual while her mind raced. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. Reeves entered without waiting for permission, closing the door quietly behind him. He surveyed the disassembled rifle, the training gear, the barely touched dinner on the desk. "You made quite an impression today," he said, taking the room's only chair. "Perfect score on the range disaster in the stress course. I know my weaknesses. Your father had the same issue early on. Precision shooters struggle with chaos initially. It can be learned." He leaned forward. "I've arranged for you to have access to the stress course at night. No observers, no records, just you and the targets." Kate looked up, surprised. "Why are you doing this, Marcus?" "Because Operation Kingfisher isn't what they think it is." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "And you're not just a communications specialist. Then what am I? A failsafe, a contingency, the one piece on the board that Volkov won't see coming until it's too late." Reeves stood, moved toward the door. "Keep practicing, especially night shooting. And climbing. You'll need to be comfortable with extreme elevation." The mission briefing mentioned nothing about climbing. "Exactly." He paused at the door. "There's a ridge on the eastern side of the target compound. Not in any of the briefing materials, but it provides a clear line of sight to the entire valley." Kate's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. Perfect overwatch position. Why isn't it part of the plan? Because officially it doesn't exist. Officially you'll be running communications from the forward base, nice and safe. Reeves met her eyes. "But we both know nothing about this mission is official." After he left, Kate sat motionless, pieces of the M24 forgotten in her lap. She pulled out the compass, opened it. The needle pointed north, steady and sure. How could she find true north when the man who'd given her the compass was the same man leading her into a labyrinth of lies? The training had been brutal, and Kate bore its evidence in new scars and harder eyes. The stress course no longer fazed her. Night after night, alone in the maze of chaos, she'd learned to thrive in confusion. Her scores climbed 70%, 80-90. Last week, she'd matched the team's best performance. The SEALs had stopped calling her Porcelain. Now they just called her Thorn, or sometimes when they thought she couldn't hear Guardian. The nickname shift meant more than any formal acceptance could have. But Garrett Dalton remained distant, professional, watchful. If he suspected Reeves was playing a deeper game, he gave no sign. The final briefing brought everyone together. The walls were covered with satellite imagery of a compound nestled in the mountains along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. The target looked like a fortress, all high walls and defensive positions. Reeves stood at the front, pointer in hand, his face grave with the weight of what they were about to attempt. "Gentlemen and Miss Thorne, this is your target, a compound controlled by Taliban forces currently holding Dr. Alexander Petrov, a nuclear physicist with critical intelligence about Pakistani weapons development. Our mission is straightforward: extract Dr. Petrov alive and return him to U.S. custody." Lieutenant Brennan raised his hand. "Intelligence on opposing forces, sir. Approximately 30 to 40 fighters. Standard Taliban armament, AKs, RPGs, possibly heavy machine guns." Reeves circled several positions on the map. "Guard posts here, here, and here. Main force concentrated in these buildings." Kate studied the topography, her eyes drawn to a feature Reeves hadn't mentioned. The eastern ridge. It dominated the valley, providing perfect oversight of the entire compound, yet it wasn't marked as a tactical position. She broke protocol by speaking without being called on. "Sir, what about the eastern ridge? It appears to provide an advantageous observation point." Reeves' face revealed nothing. "The eastern ridge is too steep, too exposed for practical use. Our insertion point will be here to the west, with a secondary team providing cover from the northern approach." Dalton frowned, studying the ridge Kate had indicated. "Thorne's right, Colonel. That ridge would give us complete valley coverage. Why not position a spotter there?" "Because no one could reach it in time without being detected," Reeves replied smoothly. "The climb would take hours, and satellite imagery shows no cover on the approach. It's a death trap." "With respect, sir," Kate persisted, "I believe it could be scaled during night hours. The rock face appears to have sufficient handholds and cloud cover is predicted for the insertion window. The room fell silent. Kate had effectively challenged the mission commander's assessment, a bold move for anyone, let alone the team's newest and most junior member. Reeves' eyes narrowed fractionally. An interesting theory, Thorne, but unnecessary. The plan as outlined provides sufficient coverage without exposing any team member to such risk. Dalton wasn't satisfied. And if things go sideways, Colonel having eyes on that ridge could be the difference between success and catastrophe. The plan is sound, Captain. Finality edged Reeves' voice. We insert at 0200 local time. Alpha Team secures the perimeter. Bravo extracts the asset. Communications will be maintained through the forward base station, which Thorne will operate from a secure position. There it was. Kate's official role laid out clearly. She'd be kept safely away from the action, manning radios from a distance. Exactly as everyone expected from a communications specialist, except for the M24 sniper rifle that had mysteriously appeared in her gear. Except for the climbing equipment that had shown up in her locker last week. Except for Reeves' cryptic comments about the Eastern Ridge. The rest of the briefing covered extraction protocols, code words, and contingency plans. Throughout it all, Kate felt Dalton watching her, his experienced eyes seeing more than he should. After they were dismissed, he caught up to her in the corridor. That ridge bothers you? It wasn't a question. It bothers me that we're ignoring the single best tactical position in the entire area, sir. Dalton nodded slowly. Bothers me too, and I've been doing this long enough to know when something doesn't add up. He lowered his voice. Reeves is hiding something. This mission, it feels wrong. A Pakistani nuclear scientist wouldn't be held in a remote Taliban compound. He'd be in a government facility in Islamabad or Karachi. Maybe he defected. Maybe both sides want him. Maybe. But Dalton didn't sound convinced. When we deploy, stick to protocol, but keep your eyes open. If things go south, and I think they will, I need to know I can count on you. Kate met his gaze steadily. You can, sir, whatever happens. For the first time since they'd met, Dalton looked at her without reservation, without judgment. Just a warrior recognizing another warrior. I believe you, Thorne. He left her standing in the hallway, the weight of history and expectation pressing down like a physical force. That evening, Kate returned to her quarters to find one final item waiting, a small case containing a specialized communications device. The note attached was in Dalton's handwriting. Secure frequency. Encrypted. Direct line to me bypasses chain of command. If standard comms fail, use this. Trust your instincts. GD. Kate held the device, understanding the significance. Dalton was giving her a way to circumvent Reeves's authority if necessary. It was an extraordinary breach of protocol, the kind of thing that could end a career. It was also a lifeline. She added it to her gear, hidden where no inspection would find it. Then she sat on her bunk, pulled out the compass, and watched the needle spin. Tomorrow they'd board a C-17 for Afghanistan. Tomorrow the mission would begin in earnest. Tomorrow she'd learn if Marcus Reeves was sending her to finish her father's work, or if she was just another piece to be sacrificed in a game whose rules she didn't understand. Kate opened a drawer, pulled out a box she rarely touched. Inside were the only things she had from her father, the medal from his last completed mission, a few letters he'd written before she was born, and a VHS tape labeled Training Day, 1992. She'd watched this tape hundreds of times. It showed Wyatt Thorne instructing a class of young SEALs, his voice strong and clear, his movements precise. In the video, he was demonstrating marksmanship fundamentals, the same lessons that would later be passed to his daughter through the intermediary of Marcus Reeves. Kate slid the tape into the player, watching her father move and speak, a ghost preserved on magnetic ribbon. Precision isn't about strength. Wyatt's recorded voice filled the small room. It's about control. Control your breathing. Control your heartbeat. Find the space between beats. That's where the shot lives. That's where you squeeze, never pull. Understand? The young SEALs in the video nodded, taking notes. Kate whispered the words along with him, having memorized every inflection. Control, space between heartbeats, squeeze. The tape continued. Wyatt demonstrating stance, sight, picture, trigger, discipline. All the mechanical aspects of sending a bullet exactly where you intended. But then he said something Kate had never fully understood until now. The hardest shot isn't the longest distance or the worst conditions. The hardest shot is when you know the right target, but taking it means someone you care about pays the price. That's when you learn what you're really made of. That's when you find out if you have the strength to pull the trigger or the courage to lower the weapon. Young Wyatt Thorne looked directly into the camera, and for just a moment Kate could almost believe he was looking at her across 33 years of separation. Choose wisely, men, because you'll carry that choice forever. The screen went to static. Kate sat in the blue glow of the dead channel, her father's compass heavy in her hand, and wondered when her moment came, when she had to choose between the mission and the men, between orders and conscience. What would she do? Would she be Marcus Reeves, sacrificing everything for the objective, or would she be Wyatt Thorne, choosing to save his team even if it meant failure? 27 years of training said one thing, but her father's voice, preserved on aging tape, whispered something else. Tomorrow in the mountains of Afghanistan, Kate would learn which compass she truly followed. The one Marcus Reeves had programmed into her, or the one Wyatt Thorne had died believing in. The Hindu Kush mountains rose like broken teeth against the dying light, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the summer heat. Kate stood on the perimeter of FOB Chapman, watching the sun bleed out across the Afghan sky, and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. Behind her, the forward operating base hummed with controlled chaos, helicopters being prepped, equipment checked and rechecked, men making peace with whatever gods they believed in before walking into the dark. In 6 hours, 2 Blackhawks would lift 24 SEALs into the night. Most of them would come back. The question was how many. Penny, for your thoughts. Kate turned to find Garrett Dalton approaching, his silhouette sharp against the sunset. 61 years old and still moving like a man half his age, all coiled muscle and watchful eyes. He stopped beside her, close enough that she could see the new lines etched around his mouth. Just thinking about the mission, sir. Liar. But he said it without heat. You're thinking about what Reeves isn't telling us. Kate didn't deny it. 3 months of training had built a foundation of respect between them, something stronger than simple chain of command. Dalton had earned his authority through 3 decades of hard choices. She wasn't going to insult him with obvious lies. The intel feels wrong, she said finally. Too clean, too simple. You noticed that too. Dalton pulled a cigarette from his pocket, unlit, just something to hold. He'd quit smoking 15 years ago, but still carried them, a reminder of weaker days. I've been in this business long enough to smell a setup. The question is, who's setup and who's the target? You think we're being used? I think Marcus Reeves has been playing chess while the rest of us play checkers for 34 years. Dalton's voice carried the weight of old betrayals. Panama taught me that. Whatever this mission really is, it's not about extracting some scientist. Kate hesitated, then made a choice. He told me something different, in private. Dalton went very still. I'm listening. He says the target isn't Dr. Petrov. It's a man named Vladimir Volkov, former KGB nuclear intelligence specialist. Reeves believes Volkov has a suitcase nuke, intends to sell it to terrorists. Target is Manhattan. She watched Dalton's face carefully. He says Volkov killed my father in Mogadishu. The silence stretched between them like razor wire. Son of a bitch, Dalton breathed finally. He's running a parallel operation, using us as cover for his own agenda. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. It's exactly what he did in Panama. Dalton's jaw tightened. We were told we were extracting a high-value asset. Turned out Reeves had a secondary objective, intelligence documents. He wanted more than he wanted his own stepson alive. When it came down to choosing between Michael and the mission, he chose the mission. Kate felt something cold settle in her chest. He told me Michael was killed in an ambush. Michael was killed because Reeves ordered us to leave him behind while he was still breathing. I refused. Tried to mount a rescue. 2 more men died because of the delay, and Michael bled out before we could reach him. Dalton's hands clenched into fists. Reeves got his documents, got a commendation, and I got to live with the fact that I didn't put a bullet in him when I had the chance. Why didn't you report it? I did. Chain of command buried it. Reeves had friends in high places, and his intelligence scored a major victory in the drug war. 3 dead SEALs seemed like an acceptable price. He turned to face her fully. That's who you're taking orders from, Thorne. A man who will sacrifice anyone, including you, if it serves his larger objective. Kate thought about the Eastern Ridge, the climbing equipment, the sniper rifle. Pieces of a puzzle she was only beginning to see. He's been preparing me for something specific, something outside the official mission parameters. What did he tell you about this ridge? That it provides perfect overwatch of the target compound, that no one could reach it without being detected, that it's too dangerous to use. She paused, and then he made sure I had everything I'd need to climb it anyway. Dalton's laugh was bitter. Classic Reeves, give you just enough information to point you in the right direction. Then let you think it was your idea. By the time you realize you're being manipulated, you're already committed. He met her eyes. So what are you going to do? It was the question Kate had been avoiding for 3 months. I don't know yet, sir. I don't know yet. Well, figure it out fast, because in 6 hours we're wheels up, and once we're in that valley, there's no calling time out to sort out whose orders you're following. He started to walk away, then stopped. One more thing. We just received updated intelligence. Enemy force numbers might be significantly higher than briefed. Possibly over 100 fighters converging on the compound in the next 24 hours. Kate's blood went cold. Does Colonel Reeves know? I informed him personally. He insists we proceed as planned, says the window of opportunity is closing. Dalton's expression was grim. I requested postponement until we can guarantee air support. He denied it. He expects us to fail, Kate said slowly, realization dawning. He's counting on it. 24 SEALs pinned down by superior numbers, all attention focused on the valley floor. And somewhere above them, someone he's spent 3 months preparing to operate independently. Someone with the skills to reach an impossible position and take an impossible shot while everyone else is dying. Dalton stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I need to know right now, Thorne. When this goes to hell, and it will, whose side are you on? Kate thought about her father dying in Mogadishu to save his team. Thought about Marcus Reeves watching his stepson bleed out because the mission mattered more. I'm with the team, Captain, she said firmly. Whatever happens, I won't leave anyone behind. Something in Dalton's expression softened just for a moment. Your father said those exact words to me in Somalia. Right before he died, saving people he barely knew. He extended his hand. Whatever Reeves has planned, we face it together. Clear? Kate took his hand. Clear, sir. After Dalton left, Kate returned to the communications bunker and began her final preparations. The official equipment was standard-issue radio systems, encryption devices, satellite uplinks. Everything she'd need to coordinate from the safety of the forward base. But hidden in her personal gear was the other equipment, the Barrett M82A1 broken down into components. Climbing harness and rope rated for extreme conditions, night vision optics, extended ammunition, everything required for a solo ascent to the Eastern Ridge. Reeves had arranged it all piece by piece, each item plausibly deniable on its own, but adding up to a mission within the mission. Kate made her decision. If Dalton was right, if Reeves was expecting the SEAL team to fail, using them as a diversion, then she needed to be on that ridge. Not for Reeves's vendetta, not to complete her father's unfinished mission, but to have a guardian angel position when 24 good men walked into hell. She began repacking her gear, preparing for the climb Reeves had always intended her to make. But this time she'd do it on her terms, for her reasons. The compass sat on the table beside her, its needle pointing steadily north. Kate picked it up, studied the inscription one more time. "I'm trying, Dad," she whispered. "God help me, I'm trying." Langley, Virginia, CIA Operations Center, 2300 hours, 5,000 miles away in a windowless room beneath CIA headquarters. Deputy Director Thomas Reynolds stood before a wall of high-resolution screens. Satellite imagery showed the mountainous terrain of the Afghanistan-Pakistan border in stark detail. Thermal signatures tracked the movement of two Black Hawk helicopters as they approached their landing zone. "Operation Kingfisher proceeding on schedule," an analyst reported. "Teams Alpha and Bravo on final approach, ETA to target 23 minutes. Reynolds nodded, his attention fixed on a separate monitor showing a smaller thermal signature moving away from FOB Chapman on foot. The tracking device embedded in Kira Thorne's equipment painted her progress in real time as she moved toward the base of the eastern ridge. "And our secondary asset?" Reynolds asked. "Thorne has left the base, heading toward the eastern ridge exactly as predicted." The analyst glanced up. "Should we inform the SEAL team of her movement?" "Negative. That information is compartmentalized." Reynolds turned to a figure standing in the shadows at the back of the room. "Colonel Reeves, your assessment." Marcus Reeves stepped forward into the light, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of the screens. At 72, he still radiated the cold authority of a man who'd spent 5 decades making impossible decisions. "Thorne is exactly where she needs to be," Reeves said quietly. "The SEALs will serve their purpose as a diversion, drawing attention from the real objective. When Volkov attempts to escape with the device, Kate will be in position. And if Captain Dalton discovers he's been used as bait, he's a professional. He'll complete his mission regardless of personal feelings." Reeves' eyes never left the screen showing Kate's thermal signature. Besides, by the time he realizes the truth, it will be too late to matter. Reynolds studied the older man with a mixture of respect and unease. "You've been planning this for 32 years. Since Somalia. Since my stepson died in Panama, actually. 34 years. Reeves's voice carried no emotion, just cold calculation. "Operation Last Frost. The hunt for the final missing Soviet suitcase nuke. Every thread leads back to Volkov, and every attempt to capture him has failed. He's too careful, too well protected. Standard operations won't work." "So you created an unconventional operation?" "I created a weapon." Reeves tapped the screen showing Kate's position. "Wyatt Thorne had the skills but not the will to do what was necessary. He chose his team over the mission, and Volkov escaped. I've spent 3 decades ensuring his daughter won't make the same mistake. She's more than just a weapon, Marcus. She's a person, Wyatt's child. She's what I made her to be." Reeves' voice hardened. "And when the moment comes, she'll do what's necessary, because I taught her that sentiment is a luxury warriors can't afford. And if she doesn't, if she's more like her father than you think..." For the first time, something flickered in Reeves' expression. Doubt, perhaps, or the ghost of a conscience long buried under operational necessity. "Then God help us all," he said quietly, "because Volkov will disappear and that device will surface in Manhattan within the month." On the screens, 2 separate dramas unfolded in real time. In the valley, Black Hawks were touching down, disgorging SEALs into hostile territory. On the ridge, a lone figure began to climb, hauling herself up a near-vertical rock face toward a position that officially didn't exist. Reynolds watched both, knowing that in the next few hours, one of 3 things would happen. They'd capture Volkov and secure the device. The operation would fail catastrophically. Or something entirely unexpected would occur. In his experience, it was usually the third option. "All teams in position," the analyst announced. "Mission clock started. Alpha team establishing perimeter. Bravo advancing on primary objective." Reeves leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the console. 34 years of planning, training, manipulation, all coming down to this moment. "Come on, Kate," he whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. "Show me I was right about you." The mountain was trying to kill her. Kate's fingers found purchase on rock slick with ice, her muscles screaming as she hauled herself upward another precious meter. The eastern ridge rose like a wall before her, nearly vertical in sections exposed to winds that threatened to pluck her from the stone and hurl her into the darkness below. She'd been climbing for 90 minutes, and every second was a negotiation with gravity. Through her earpiece, she could hear the operation unfolding. Dalton's voice, calm and professional, coordinating the insertion. The rhythmic thump of rotors as the Black Hawks departed, leaving 24 men alone in enemy territory. Alpha team in position, northern perimeter secure. Bravo advancing on compound, no contact yet. Kate pulled herself onto a narrow ledge, gasping for breath in the thin air. Her hands were bleeding, the climbing gloves worn through in places. The temperature was dropping fast, had to be near freezing now, even in summer. Her breath fogged in front of her face, each exhalation a small cloud of crystallized mortality. She checked her position using the GPS unit. Halfway up. Another hour of climbing minimum. If the intelligence was right, the SEALs would be hitting the compound in 30 minutes. If Reeves was right about the enemy numbers, they'd be in serious trouble shortly after that. Kate kept climbing. The rock face here was treacherous, offering handholds that crumbled under pressure, forcing her to spread her weight across multiple points of contact. Her shoulders burned, her forearms felt like they were filled with broken glass. But she'd trained for this night after night in the climbing gym, pushing past the point where her body begged to quit. Marcus Reeves had taught her that the body would give up long before it actually failed. That pain was just information, fear just chemistry. That a warrior's will was stronger than flesh. He'd taught her a lot of things. The question was whether all of it had been in service of her development or his agenda. Contact. Heavy contact. Multiple hostiles from the North Ridge. Dalton's voice cut through her concentration. Kate froze on the rock face, listening. Alpha team taking fire. Count at least 50, no more. They're everywhere. Bravo team fall back to Alpha's position, defensive formation. Kate's heart sank. It was happening exactly as Dalton had feared. The intelligence had been wrong or deliberately falsified. The SEALs weren't facing 30 or 40 fighters. They were facing an army. She resumed climbing with renewed urgency, ignoring the protest of her exhausted muscles. The SEALs needed her in position. Whatever Reeves had planned, whatever agenda he was running, none of it mattered if Dalton and his men died in that valley. We've got RPGs incoming. Get down! The explosion was audible even at this distance, a dull thump that echoed off the mountains. Kate risked a glance down and saw muzzle flashes painting the valley in brief, violent illumination. The compound looked like a hornet's nest, fighters pouring from buildings that should have been lightly defended. This wasn't an extraction operation gone wrong. This was a deliberate trap. Kate's hand slipped on an icy outcropping. For one heart-stopping moment, she hung by 3 fingers, feet scrabbling for purchase, the abyss yawning below. Then her boot found a crack, her other hand locked onto solid rock, and she was climbing again, driven by desperate need. All teams, this is Dalton. Consolidate on my position. We're surrounded. Conserve ammunition and wait for dawn extraction. The professional calm in his voice couldn't hide the truth. Dawn was 7 hours away. Against these numbers, with limited ammunition and no air support, the SEALs wouldn't last that long. Kate's earpiece crackled with a different signal, the secure channel Dalton had given her. Thorn. His voice was tight now, the calm cracking slightly. Communication station reports you're not at your post. Where are you? She made a split-second decision. En route to alternate position, Eastern Ridge. Silence stretched for several seconds, punctuated by gunfire and shouted commands in the background. Understood, Dalton said finally. We're in a bad situation here. Intel was completely wrong, facing approximately 200 hostiles well-equipped. They were waiting for us. Kate pulled herself onto another ledge, used the moment to catch her breath. Status of the team. 3 wounded, none critical yet. We've pulled back to defensive positions, but we're surrounded. No extraction possible until daylight at earliest. And the target, Dr. Petrov. Negative contact. Building was empty when we breached. A pause heavy with implication. This whole thing feels like a setup, Thorn. It was. Kate knew it with cold certainty. Reeves had orchestrated this, the false intelligence, the timing, the trap. 24 SEALs serving as bait while the real operation unfolded elsewhere. But where and for what? She reached a relatively stable outcropping and took a moment to assemble her rifle. The Barrett M82A1 came together in her hands with practiced precision, each component fitting into place. Through the advanced scope, the valley below transformed from chaotic shadows into a detailed battlefield. She could see the SEAL positions pinned behind inadequate cover, could see the enemy fighters moving with disturbing coordination, their tactics too sophisticated for typical Taliban forces, could see the muzzle flashes, the RPG launches, the slow constriction of the noose. "I have overwatch," Kate reported. "Eastern Ridge secured, stand by." Dalton's reply carried the first hint of hope since the mission began. "Can you provide support?" Kate settled into position, controlling her breathing as her father had taught her, as Reeves had refined, as she'd practiced 10,000 times until it became as natural as her heartbeat. She identified the most immediate threat, a heavy machine gun position that had Alpha Team pinned down. The gunner was well protected behind sandbags, visible only when he shifted to adjust his fire. Distance 876 meters, wind 12 knots from the northwest, temperature -2 Celsius, elevation difference 340 meters. Her mind processed the variables automatically, years of training condensing complex ballistics into instinctive adjustment. She made minute corrections to her scope, settled her breathing, found the rhythm of her heartbeat. Space between the beats, that's where the shot lives. Kate squeezed the trigger. The Barrett's report echoed across the mountains like thunder. Through her scope, she watched the machine gunner slump forward, a precision hole through his forehead. The heavy weapon fell silent. "Target down," she reported calmly. Below, she could almost feel the SEALs' confusion. That shot had come from nowhere, from a position they didn't know existed. For 3 seconds, both the Americans and their attackers paused, trying to understand what had just happened. Kate was already acquiring her next target. Another shot. An RPG carrier spun backward, his warhead exploding harmlessly against dirt. A third shot dropped the spotter, directing enemy fire. One by one, the positions that had locked down the SEALs began to unravel, as if an unseen hand was erasing threats from the battlefield. "Thorne," Dalton's voice held disbelief. "That was you." "Affirmative. I count approximately 35 hostiles visible from my position. Multiple heavy weapons emplacements. They have you surrounded in a standard ambush formation." "I thought you were communications support." Kate allowed herself a small smile despite the circumstances. "I am. I also happen to be a very good shot." She worked methodically, each shot creating space for the SEALs to maneuver. From her elevated position, she could see what they couldn't: the shifting patterns of enemy movement, their reinforcement routes, their command structure. "Dalton, you have 3 fighters approaching your 6 o'clock, using the Dry Creek bed as cover." "Copy that." Brief burst of gunfire. "Targets down. Thorne, you're giving us a fighting chance here." But even as she provided overwatch, Kate's tactical mind was processing the larger picture. This ambush was too well coordinated, too perfectly timed. Someone had known exactly when and where the SEALs would insert. Someone had positioned nearly 200 fighters in a remote valley on the off chance of American Special Operations Forces arriving. This level of preparation meant intelligence had been leaked, or deliberately provided. Through her scope, Kate caught movement in a building she'd previously marked as clear. A man emerged briefly, tall, European features, civilian clothes. He appeared to be speaking urgently into a satellite phone. "Possible HVT spotted," Kate reported. "Building 3 eastern side, Caucasian male, mid-50s, gray hair. Doesn't match target description." "That's not Petrov," Dalton confirmed. "Petrov is in his 30s, dark hair." Kate's mind raced. Not the target they'd been briefed on, but possibly the target Reeves had really sent them for. She adjusted her scope, tried to get a better look at the man's face. Recognition hit like a physical blow. The photographs in Reeves's folder, the intelligence briefings, the man who'd haunted her childhood like a ghost, responsible for her father's death. Vladimir Volkov. Dalton, Kate said slowly, I have visual confirmation on Vladimir Volkov. Who the hell is Vladimir Volkov? Our target is Alexander Petrov. Kate hesitated, then made another choice. The team deserved the truth even if Reeves had planned to keep them in the dark. Volkov is former KGB nuclear intelligence specialist. Disappeared after the Soviet Union collapsed. He's been linked to black market nuclear materials across 3 continents. She paused. Colonel Reeves briefed me separately. He believes Volkov has acquired a Soviet-era suitcase nuke, 15-kiloton yield intended for deployment in Manhattan. The radio silence that followed was deafening. When Dalton spoke again, his voice was ice. So this was never about extracting a scientist. We're bait, a distraction while Reeves pursues his real objective. That's my assessment, sir. Christ. She could hear Dalton's breathing, could imagine him processing the implications while managing a firefight. Does this change our tactical situation? Unknown. But if Volkov has the device... An explosion cut her off. One of the SEAL positions had taken a direct RPG hit. Man down, Brennan's hit, bad. Through her scope, Kate watched in horror as Lieutenant Cole Brennan was dragged to cover, his body, limp blood spreading across his tactical vest. The team's second in command, the young operator who'd gone from calling her porcelain to treating her as an equal, now possibly dying because of a mission built on lies. Thorne. Dalton's voice was urgent now, desperation creeping in around the edges of his control. If you have any bright ideas, now would be the time. Kate studied the battlefield with professional detachment, pushing emotion aside to focus on tactical reality. She counted 5 RPG teams targeting SEAL positions. If she could eliminate them, the team might have a window to reposition to better cover. I count 5 RPG teams. If I can neutralize them, you'll have approximately 45 seconds to move to the northeastern ravine. It's not currently covered by their heavy weapons. Do it! Kate shifted her attention to the RPG teams, prioritizing the most immediate threats. Her fingers squeezed the trigger rhythmically, each shot the product of thousands of hours of training, each kill a calculation stripped of emotion. 5 shots, 5 targets down, less than 20 seconds. Move now, she instructed. Northeastern ravine. I'll provide covering fire. The SEALs executed the maneuver with the fluid precision of men who'd trained together for months. Kate eliminated any fighter who tried to pursue her, Barrett speaking with mechanical regularity. Within minutes, Dalton's team had established a more defensible position in the rocky ravine. Better position secured, Dalton confirmed. 3 wounded, 1 critical. Brennan might not make it without immediate evac. Kate felt the weight of their situation crushing down. 24 men trapped in hostile territory because of a mission designed to fail. How many would make it out? How many wives would become widows, children fatherless? Because Marcus Reeves had decided some objectives were worth any price, movement caught her attention. Through her scope, she watched Volkov leaving the compound with a small security detail. They moved not toward the SEAL positions but away from the battle, entirely heading deeper into the mountains through a narrow pass. They were carrying something, a hard case reinforced approximately 1 meter long. Everything Reeves had told her about the suitcase nuke came rushing back. The missing Soviet device, 15 kilotons, Manhattan. This was it, the real mission. The reason Reeves had positioned her here, given her the tools, shaped her into a weapon he could point at his enemies. Volkov is moving, Kate reported. Small group heading east through a mountain pass. They're carrying a reinforced case. Dalton's response was immediate. Nuclear device would fit in a case that size. My assessment as well. Kate made her decision before Dalton could voice the order she knew was coming. I'm going to follow them, sir. Thorne, that's not the mission. It never was, Captain. Kate secured her rifle, began preparing for movement. The real mission is whatever Volkov is carrying away from this battlefield while 200 fighters keep you occupied. This was always about him, about stopping whatever he's planning. The silence stretched. She could almost hear Dalton's tactical mind working through the implications, weighing options, making the kind of impossible choice that defined leadership. "Go," he said finally, "but maintain contact. And Thorn—" His voice softened slightly. "Be careful. This whole operation stinks of a sacrifice play." "I know, sir." Kate gathered her gear, took one last look at the valley below. The SEAL team was holding but barely. Dawn was still 5 hours away and their ammunition wouldn't last forever. She was leaving them to pursue a target through hostile mountains alone on the word of a man who'd proven he'd sacrifice anyone for mission success. But if Volkov really had a nuclear device, if he really intended to use it against American civilians, the choice wasn't really a choice at all. Kate began her descent from the eastern side of the ridge, moving parallel to Volkov's route. She was trying, God, she was trying, but in the dark of the Afghan mountains with men dying below and a nuclear threat ahead, true north seemed impossibly far away. The trail Volkov's team followed wound through terrain that seemed designed by a malevolent god. Kate moved like a shadow, using every scrap of cover the broken landscape offered, maintaining visual contact with the group ahead while staying far enough back to avoid detection. 5 men, all moving with the disciplined efficiency of professionals. Not Taliban fighters, these were operators, possibly former military, definitely experienced. They moved in a tactical formation, weapons ready, alert to their surroundings. And in the center of their protective formation, Vladimir Volkov carried the reinforced case like it contained the crown jewels of a fallen empire. Which in a sense it did. Kate's earpiece crackled with updates from the valley behind her. The firefight continued, though the intensity had decreased slightly. Dalton's team was holding their position, but the arithmetic was brutal. Limited ammunition against unlimited enemies. Dawn was still 4 hours away. She pushed the thought aside. Focus on the mission at hand. One target, one objective. Stop Volkov. Secure the device. The eastern sky was beginning to show the first hints of false dawn, that deceptive lightning that preceded true sunrise by an hour. It would make tracking easier, but also make concealment harder. Kate increased her pace, closing the distance. Ahead, Volkov's team reached a small plateau overlooking a narrow valley. They stopped, began setting up equipment. Kate recognized a satellite communications array, various electronic devices. The reinforced case sat in the center of their makeshift camp, still closed, guarded by 2 men, while Volkov worked with the communications gear. Kate positioned herself behind a cluster of rocks approximately 300 meters away. From here, she could see the camp clearly, could hear fragments of conversation carried on the wind. Russian, confirming her suspicions about their origins. She keyed her radio, keeping her voice to barely a whisper. "Dalton, they've stopped. Setting up communications. Appears they're waiting for something or someone." "Extraction." Dalton's voice was tight, managing his own crisis while trying to process hers. Helicopter pickup would be feasible from that terrain. That's my assessment. Kate continued to observe, noting details. The way they handled the case, extreme care, specialized equipment to check something within it. The precision of their security perimeter. The calm efficiency of men who'd done this before. Through her scope, she watched Volkov speaking into a satellite handset. She was too far to hear clearly, but she caught fragments. Proceeds as planned. Americans contained. Delivery will occur at designated coordinates. Exchange. Delivery. The word sent ice through Kate's veins. This wasn't just about stealing a nuclear device. It was about transferring it to someone else. The final link in a chain that would end with 15 kilotons of Soviet engineering detonating in the heart of American civilization. She keyed her radio again. "Dalton, I have partial confirmation. Volkov mentioned exchange and delivery. They're not just transporting the device, they're selling it." Christ. Even through the static and distance, she could hear the weight in Dalton's voice. "You need to stop them. Whatever it takes." Kate studied the camp layout, calculating angles, distances, fields of fire. 5 targets, all professionals in defensive positions. the case in the center potentially armed with anti-tamper devices, and somewhere in the distance the sound of helicopter rotors growing louder. Incoming extraction. Maybe 2 minutes out, she could eliminate the team. The range was challenging but manageable. 5 shots, 5 targets. She'd done harder in training, but the case. If it was armed, if Volkov had rigged it with explosives or a dead man's switch, one stray bullet could trigger a detonation that would kill her, the team, and possibly the SEALs still fighting in the valley below. Kate needed more information. She needed to get closer. Moving with painstaking care, she began her approach. Every step was calculated to minimize noise and visibility. The growing light worked against her, but the focus of Volkov's team on their equipment and the incoming helicopter provided a narrow window. 200 meters, 150. At 100 meters, she could hear them clearly. Volkov was on the satellite phone again, his accented English carrying across the plateau. Device is secure, activation sequence verified, yield estimated at 15 kilotons, sufficient to destroy most of Manhattan. Our buyer will be pleased. Manhattan. Confirmation of everything Reeves had told her, everything she'd been trained to prevent. Kate settled into a depression in the ground, using the natural terrain as cover. From here, she had clean shots on all 5 targets. The helicopter was visible now, a black dot against the lightning sky, maybe 90 seconds out. She made her tactical assessment. 5 targets. Prioritized by threat level. The guards nearest the case first, then the communications operator, then the remaining security, leaving Volkov for last. Capture him alive if possible. He'd have intelligence about the network, the buyers, the larger conspiracy. Kate steadied her breathing, found the space between heartbeats, prepared to engage. The first shot would be the signal. After that, it would be chaos and reaction time and the training that had been drilled into her since childhood. 5 targets in under 10 seconds or the helicopter would arrive and she'd lose her chance. Her finger curled around the trigger. And then Volkov did something unexpected. One of his guards opened the reinforced case, allowing him to inspect its contents. From her angle, Kate couldn't see inside completely, but she saw enough. The compact device, Soviet-designed with modern modifications. The digital timer display, the specialized circuitry, and Volkov checking it with what appeared to be radiation detection equipment. Active, armed, ready for deployment. The implications crashed over Kate like a physical wave. If she engaged now, if the firefight damaged the device or triggered its detonation sequence, she'd kill everyone within 5 kilometers, including herself, including the 24 SEALs still fighting for their lives in the valley. Kate's finger froze on the trigger. The helicopter was 60 seconds out now, descending toward the plateau. Volkov was closing the case, preparing for extraction. In moments, he'd be gone, and with him the last Soviet suitcase nuke bound for Manhattan and a death toll measured in hundreds of thousands. She had to act, but how? What shot could she take that would stop the exchange without risking the device? The answer came from an unexpected direction. A voice behind her, quiet and familiar, speaking words that shouldn't be possible. Dead man's switch is a bluff, Kate. Old KGB tactic. Create impossible choices to paralyze your opponent. Kate spun weapon, coming around by pure instinct to find Marcus Reeves emerging from behind a rock formation not 20 meters away. He carried a specialized sniper rifle, his weathered Mingus calm despite the insanity of his presence here. How? Kate began. I've been on the adjacent ridge the entire time, watching, waiting to see if my investment would pay off. Reeves moved forward with deliberate care, keeping his weapon pointed safely downrange. You were never alone, Kate. I wouldn't risk my most valuable asset without insurance. The betrayal should have shocked her. Instead, it felt inevitable, the final piece of a puzzle she'd been solving for 3 months. You've been following me since I left Chapman. Since before that. Since I put you on that SEAL team, since I started training you 27 years ago. Reeves settled into position beside her, his rifle trained on the camp below. Everything has led to this moment. The question is whether you have the strength to pull the trigger when it matters. Kate's mind raced. Reeves here, on Overwatch, prepared to engage, which meant the SEAL team, Dalton and his men, they were always expendable, weren't they? Bait to draw Volkov out to create this exact situation. They're soldiers doing their duty, as are you. Reeves's voice carried no apology, no regret, just cold operational logic. Sometimes victory requires sacrifice. Your father never understood that. He chose sentiment over success in Mogadishu, and Volkov escaped. I spent 32 years ensuring you wouldn't make the same mistake. The helicopter was 40 seconds out. Volkov's team was preparing to board the case being secured for transport. You trained me to be a weapon, Kate said quietly, pointed me at your enemies and pulled the trigger. I trained you to do what's necessary, to see the larger picture, to understand that individual lives, even good lives, even innocent lives, are sometimes the price of protecting millions. Reeves glanced at her, his gray eyes cold as winter. Your father had Volkov in his sights in Mogadishu, perfect shot, but he chose to save his team instead of taking it. That choice led directly to this moment, to 3 decades of Volkov operating freely, to this device being sold to terrorists, to the threat hanging over Manhattan. My father saved his team. That's not weakness, it's honor. Honor doesn't prevent nuclear attacks, Kate. Hard choices do. Necessary sacrifices do. Reeves's finger moved to his trigger. So choose. Pull the trigger and stop this, or let sentiment make you hesitate like your father did and live with the consequences. Below them, the helicopter was landing, its rotors kicking up dust and debris. Volkov was moving toward it, the case being handed up to waiting gunners in the open door. Kate's scope tracked him. Center mass. Easy shot at this range. One pull of the trigger and the man who'd killed her father would be dead. But something Volkov had said earlier echoed in her mind. Our buyer will be pleased. Buyer. Singular. If we kill Volkov now, Kate said, slowly working through the implications, we stop this transaction. But the buyer is still out there, still wanting a nuclear device, still with resources to acquire one. Irrelevant. We secure this device, eliminate this threat, and create the next one. Whoever Volkov was selling to has the money and connections to try again. We'd be treating a symptom, not the disease. Reeves's jaw tightened. We work with the intelligence we have. The mission is to stop Volkov and secure the device. Everything else is above our pay grade. The helicopter was 20 seconds from full liftoff. Volkov was climbing aboard, his security team providing cover. The case was secured in the aircraft's cargo bay. Kate made her decision. Instead of aiming at Volkov, she shifted her point of aim. The helicopter's tail rotor. A precision shot at a moving target, difficult but not impossible. What are you doing? Reeves demanded. Completing the mission, my way. She fired. The bullet struck the tail rotor assembly with a sound like a bell being struck. The helicopter immediately began to spin, the pilot fighting for control. It lurched sideways, tilted dangerously, the rotors screaming in protest. Kate was already moving, racing down the slope toward the camp. Behind her, she heard Reeves cursing, then the crack of his rifle as he engaged targets. The helicopter crashed onto the plateau in a controlled disaster, skidding sideways, rotors shearing off metal, shrieking against stone. Men tumbled from the open door. The case rolled free, bouncing across the rocky ground. Kate reached the camp as Volkov's security team was recovering from the crash. The first guard turned toward her, bringing his weapon up. She put 2 rounds center mass without breaking stride. The second guard managed to fire a burst that whined past her head before her answering shots dropped him. Volkov himself was crawling from the wreckage, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. He saw Kate approaching and his hand went to the pistol on his hip. Don't! Kate ordered, her weapon trained on his center mass. Volkov's hand froze. For a moment they stared at each other across 10 meters of Afghan plateau, the daughter and the man who'd killed her father. Kira Thorne, Volkov said, his English accented but clear. I should have known. Marcus always did play the long game. Step away from the case. Or what? You'll shoot me. Volkov's smile was cold. Your godfather has spent 32 years preparing you for this moment, creating the perfect weapon to point at me. The daughter of the man I killed in Mogadishu trained specifically to finish what her father couldn't. Kate's grip tightened on her weapon. You don't know anything about my father? Don't I? Volkov pulled himself to his feet, swaying slightly. Wyatt Thorne. Good soldier. Excellent shot. Weak heart. He tapped his chest. He had me in his sights, clean kill, but he noticed the explosives I'd rigged throughout the building. Dead man's switch. If he shot me, everyone died, including his team. Kate said nothing, but her weapon never wavered. He made a choice, Volkov continued. Warned his team about the explosives, gave up his shot to save them. It cost him his life, but he died honorably protecting his brothers. Volkov's smile widened. Marcus Reeves has never forgiven him for that choice, has spent 3 decades teaching you that your father was wrong. That sentiment is weakness. That victory requires sacrifice. Shut up. Ask yourself why Marcus kept you so close all these years, why he trained you personally, why he told you every story about your father except the one that mattered. Volkov gestured toward the case. The device is armed. Dead man's switch. My heart stops, it detonates. 15 kilotons. You'll kill yourself, everyone on this plateau, and all those American soldiers still fighting in the valley below. Kate's blood ran cold. If he was telling the truth, if the device was rigged to detonate on his death, shooting him would trigger exactly what she'd been trained to prevent. You're bluffing. Am I? Volkov's hand moved slowly toward the case. Care to bet the lives of 24 good men on that assumption? Behind her, Kate heard Reeves approaching, his boots crunching on loose stone. He'd eliminated the remaining security team, was moving to secure the objective. Kate! Reeves's voice was sharp. Take the shot. The device isn't armed. He's trying to manipulate you. How do you know? Kate called back without taking her eyes off Volkov. Because I've been hunting him for 3 decades. I know his tactics. This is what he does. Creates impossible dilemmas, forces you to hesitate, then exploits the opening. Volkov laughed, bitter and cold. Still so certain, Marcus. Still so sure you have all the answers. He looked at Kate. Did he tell you about Panama, about how he ordered his team to abandon his own stepson to secure intelligence documents? Michael Reeves, 27 years old, bleeding out while his father chose papers over people. That's enough, Reeves snapped. Or about Somalia. About how he and Wyatt had different orders. Your father was told to capture me, but Marcus had authorization to eliminate me regardless of collateral damage. Volkov's eyes locked on Kate's. Your father discovered the truth too late, realized that Marcus had set him up, used him as bait to draw me into position. Wyatt could have taken the shot, completed Marcus's mission, but he chose to save his team instead, chose honor over orders. The words hit Kate like physical blows. She looked at Reeves, saw no denial in his face, just cold calculation. It's true, she asked quietly. The mission parameters were classified need to know, Reeves said. Your father knew his role, he chose not to fulfill it. You used him, set him up to die if he didn't follow your plan. I set him up to succeed if he had the strength to do what was necessary. Reeves's voice hardened. He didn't. And 32 years later, we're still cleaning up the consequences of his weakness. Kate's world tilted. Everything she thought she knew about her father's death, about Reeves's motives, about her own purpose, all of it had been built on carefully constructed lies. The helicopter behind Volkov suddenly burst into flames as leaking fuel found an ignition source. The explosion threw heat across the plateau, sent debris spinning through the air. In the chaos, Volkov made his move. He lunged for the case, his hand closing on the handle. Kate's training took over her weapon, tracking finger tightening on the trigger. One shot center mass and the man who'd killed her father would be dead, but his words echoed dead man's switch. Your heart stops, everyone dies. Kate hesitated, and in that split second of hesitation, a single rifle shot cracked across the plateau. Not from Kate's weapon. From behind her, Volkov's body jerked violently, his head snapping backward. The precision round had struck him directly between the eyes. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, dead before he hit the ground. Kate spun to see Reeves lowering his rifle, his expression neutral. "Mission accomplished," he said simply. For 3 endless seconds, Kate waited for the detonation, for the device to explode, for the world to end in nuclear fire. Nothing happened. Reeves walked past her, moving to check Volkov's body. Dead Man's switch was a bluff. As I said, it's what he does, creates impossible choices to paralyze opponents. He looked at Kate, something almost like disappointment in his eyes. "Your father fell for the same tactic in Mogadishu. I hoped you'd be stronger." Kate stood frozen, her weapon forgotten in her hands. Reeves had been right about the bluff. But he'd also been right about everything else, the manipulation, the lies, the decades of shaping her into a weapon he could control. And she'd almost pulled the trigger, almost become exactly what he'd designed her to be. Reeves secured the case, performing a quick check of its contents. "Device is intact, mission successful. We'll arrange extraction, get this back to proper authorities." He keyed his radio. "Langley, this is Reeves. Target neutralized, package secured. Request immediate extraction at coordinates." "No." Reeves paused, turned to look at her. "Excuse me." Kate found her voice, found her conviction. "I said no. This doesn't end here. The mission is complete, Kate. Volkov is dead, the device is secured. Whatever personal issues you have with my methods, they're irrelevant now." "Personal issues?" Kate's laugh was hollow. "You spent 27 years manipulating me, used my father's death as leverage to turn me into your personal weapon. Sent 24 good men into a trap so you could pursue your vendetta. Those men are soldiers doing their duty. Those men are dying right now because you lied." Kate's voice rose. "Because you cared more about your mission than their lives. Just like Panama. Just like you taught me to do." Reeves's expression hardened. "I taught you to see the bigger picture, to understand that sometimes the mission matters more than the people." Kate finished. "I know. I've heard it 1,000 times. Sentiment is weakness. Victory requires sacrifice. Hard choices save lives." She stepped closer, her weapon not quite pointed at him, but not quite away either. "But here's what you never taught me, Marcus. You never taught me to ask whose lives we're saving, whose sacrifice we're demanding, and who gets to make that choice." "Kate, my father made a choice in Mogadishu. He chose to save his team over completing a mission built on lies. You've spent 3 decades telling me that was weakness. But standing here now, knowing what you did, how you manipulated him..." Kate's voice broke slightly. "He was stronger than both of us, because he chose honor over orders, chose people over objectives, and he died for it, yes, but he died knowing who he was, what he stood for." Reeves stared at her for a long moment, then surprisingly something like regret flickered across his face. "I never wanted to use you, Kate, but I needed someone I could trust absolutely. Someone with the skills, the motivation, the vulnerability you could exploit." Kate keyed her radio, switching to the frequency Dalton had given her. "Dalton, this is Thorne. Do you copy static? Then Thorne, go ahead. We're still holding, but it's getting tight. Status on Volkov. Volkov is neutralized. Nuclear device is secured." She paused. "But I need you to know the truth about this mission." "Kate, don't," Reeves warned. She ignored him. "The extraction mission was a cover. The intel was deliberately falsified. You were sent into a trap to serve as bait while Colonel Reeves pursued his real objective, eliminating Volkov and securing a Soviet suitcase nuke." The silence on the radio stretched for several seconds. When Dalton spoke again, his voice was ice. "Are you telling me my men are dying because Reeves used us as a diversion?" "Yes, sir." "Put him on." Kate held out the radio. Reeves looked at it, then at her, calculation visible in his eyes. Finally, he took it. "Captain Dalton." "You son of a bitch!" Dalton's voice shook with controlled fury. "You sent us in blind. Told us it was a rescue mission. Let us walk into an ambush while you... I did what was necessary to prevent a nuclear attack on American soil." Reeves cut him off. Your team provided essential tactical support for a critical operation. The sacrifice? Don't you dare talk to me about sacrifice. Not after Panama. Not after you've spent 30 years playing God with other people's lives. Reeves's jaw tightened. Your extraction will arrive at dawn as scheduled. Get your men to the LZ and... I'm filing a full report the second we're stateside, every detail of this clusterfuck, and this time I've got witnesses who'll back me up. That report will be classified above your clearance level before it reaches anyone who matters. This operation has authorization from... I don't give a damn about your authorizations, Marcus. This ends today. The radio went dead. Reeves handed it back to Kate, his expression unreadable. He'll calm down once he's out of the field. Operational stress adrenaline. He knows how the game works. Maybe that's the problem, Kate said quietly. Maybe the game itself is broken. She made her decision. I'm staying with the team, making sure they get out alive. That's not necessary. The extraction is still 4 hours away. A lot can happen in 4 hours. Kate secured her weapon. You want the device safely back to Langley, take it yourself. I'm going back to help people who trusted me. Kate, you're being emotional, letting sentiment cloud your judgment. No, I'm making a choice. The same choice my father made. She met his eyes squarely. And I'm finally understanding why he made it. For a long moment they stared at each other. The old soldier who'd sacrificed everything for victory and the young woman who'd finally realized the cost. If you walk away now, Reeves said quietly, there's no coming back. No more CIA work, no more classified operations. You'll be another operator who couldn't handle the pressure. Your career will be over. Then it's over. Kate turned toward the path back to the valley. Some things matter more than careers. Like what? She thought of her father dying to save his team. Thought of Dalton and 23 other men fighting through the night because they trusted their mission, trusted their country, trusted that someone was watching their backs. Like honor, Marcus. Like being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you stood for something more than just winning at any cost. She started walking. Behind her, Reeves called out, Your father would be proud of you, for whatever that's worth. Kate stopped, looked back. For the first time since she'd known him, Marcus Reeves looked old, tired, the weight of 34 years of hard choices finally showing through the armor of cold professionalism. It's worth everything, she said. That's what you never understood. Then she left him there on the plateau with his victory and his device and his ghosts and began the trek back to the valley where real people were fighting for real reasons. Her father's daughter, after all. The valley. 06:12 hours. The sun was rising over the Hindu Kush by the time Kate reached the SEAL position. The firefight had ebbed to sporadic exchanges, the enemy forces pulling back slightly as light filled the valley. Whether they were regrouping for another push or waiting to see what dawn would bring was impossible to say. Kate slid into the ravine where Dalton's team had fortified her arrival, drawing weapons. Before recognition set in. Stand down, Dalton ordered. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past, 6 hours blood-splattered, exhausted, but still commanding. Thorne, wasn't sure you'd come back. Couldn't let you have all the fun, sir. Despite everything, Dalton almost smiled. Device secured. Reeves has it. He'll arrange his own extraction. Kate assessed the team's condition with a practiced eye. 4 wounded, including Brennan, who was unconscious but stable. Ammunition running low. Defensive position adequate but not sustainable. How long until our ride arrives? 90 minutes, assuming the enemy doesn't push before then. Dalton handed her a spare magazine. We could use another rifle. Think you can manage? Kate took position on the perimeter, her Barrett finding targets with mechanical efficiency. The enemy had pulled back to around 500 meters, content to wait. Smart tactics, why assault a defended position when you could let thirst and heat and dwindling ammunition do the work. As she settled in one of the younger SEALs, a kid who couldn't be more than 25 spoke up. Is it true, ma'am, what the captain said about the mission being a setup? Kate looked at Dalton, who gave a slight nod. The team deserved the truth. Yes, the extraction was cover for a larger operation. Colonel Reeves was hunting a high-value target who'd acquired a nuclear weapon. You were meant to draw attention while he pursued the real objective. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. So we're expendable, the young SEAL said quietly. Acceptable losses. To Reeves, yes. Kate met his eyes. But not to me. Not to Captain Dalton. We don't leave people behind, ever. Easy to say now, but you went after Reeves's target anyway, didn't you? Left us to complete his mission. The accusation stung because it was partially true. I did, and I was wrong. Kate set down her rifle, faced the team fully. I should have stayed here. Should have chosen you over the mission from the start. My father would have. Your father, another operator, older recognition dawning. Wyatt Thorne, Somalia 93. I heard stories about him when I went through training. What kind of stories? That he was the best sniper in SEAL history. That he died saving his team from an ambush. That he turned down a shot that could have ended a major threat because taking it would have meant sacrificing the men under his command. Kate felt something loosen in her chest. You heard right? Instructors used his story as an example, said that's what it meant to be a SEAL mission matters, but the man next to you matters more. The operator studied her. You're his kid. You were supposed to be communications only, but you climbed that ridge, provided overwatch, saved our asses, then came back when you could have stayed gone. He extended his hand. Lance Petty Officer Mike Torres. And I don't know what Reeves told you, ma'am, but from where I'm sitting, you're exactly like your old man. Kate shook his hand, surprised to feel her throat tighten with emotion. The radio crackled. All stations, this is Archangel. We have 2 Apaches inbound to your position. ETA 12 minutes. Sit tight, gentlemen. Cavalry's coming. Dalton allowed himself a small smile. Looks like someone at higher headquarters finally pulled their head out. Torres set smoke for the gunships. Everyone else stay low and let the professionals work. The next 12 minutes were a symphony of destruction. The Apache helicopters arrived like avenging angels, their 30mm cannons tearing apart enemy positions with surgical precision. The Taliban fighters that had seemed so threatening in the dark melted away under aerial assault, those who could retreating deeper into the mountains. By the time the extraction Blackhawks touched down, the valley was secure. As the SEALs loaded their wounded aboard, Dalton pulled Kate aside. You're staying with us, he said. It wasn't a question. If you'll have me, sir. After today, Thorne, you're practically family. He glanced toward the mountains where Reeves had disappeared with his prize. But there'll be consequences, reports to file, questions to answer. Reeves won't take your defection lightly. Let him come. I'm done being anyone's weapon. Dalton nodded approval. Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. And I don't say that lightly. They boarded the helicopter together, the rotors already spinning up. As they lifted off, Kate looked back at the valley where 24 men had fought through the night, where she'd made her choice, where she'd finally understood what her father had died for. Not for failure, not because he was weak, but because he'd valued the men beside him more than the mission ahead of him. Because he'd understood that some victories weren't worth the price. Reeves would call it weakness, would write reports about how sentiment had compromised operational effectiveness, about how Wyatt Thorne's daughter had made the same mistakes as her father. But sitting in that helicopter, surrounded by men who'd survived because people had chosen to fight for them rather than abandon them, Kate knew the truth. Her father hadn't failed. He'd succeeded at something more important than any mission. He'd remained human. Epilogue. True North, 6 months later. Arlington National Cemetery. The autumn leaves were falling when Kate stood before her father's grave for the first time since learning the truth. The headstone had been updated following a formal Navy review. The classified details of Operation Gothic Serpent had been examined by officers who hadn't been bought or intimidated by Marcus Reeves. The truth had emerged slowly but surely. The new inscription read, Wyatt Thomas Thorne, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, Navy Cross, Operation Gothic Serpent. He never left anyone behind, Kate traced the letters with her fingers, feeling the weight of legacy and understanding. Thought I'd find you here. She turned to see Garrett Dalton approaching civilian clothes instead of uniform, looking oddly comfortable in retirement. The Navy had forced him out as part of the political fallout from Operation Kingfisher, but he wore his freedom like a badge of honor. Captain. Just Garrett now. We're both civilians, might as well use first names. He stood beside her, studying the headstone. Beautiful work. Your father earned every word of it. The review board agreed, posthumous Navy Cross for actions above and beyond. Turns out when you pull classified missions into the light, the truth becomes harder to bury. Reeves learned that lesson yet. Kate allowed herself a small smile. He's been reassigned to an advisory position, diplomatic speak for forced retirement. His replacement has implemented new oversight protocols for joint operations. No more solo missions built on lies. Small comfort to the people who died trusting him. Small comfort, Kate agreed, but it's something. They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the rustle of leaves and distant traffic. I have news, Garrett said finally. Remember how I mentioned that position opening up on my team? The one you don't have anymore because they forced you out? Turns out Naval Intelligence has a different kind of position. Training and operational support for SEAL teams. Focus on improved communications protocols and intelligence verification. He looked at her directly. Creating systems specifically designed to prevent another Kingfisher. They want someone who's been on both sides, operations and intelligence. Someone who understands the cost of bad information. Kate's heart rate picked up. They're offering me a position, more than that. They want you to design the entire program, be the lead instructor. Garrett's expression grew serious. It means staying in the game. Means you'll still be around Reeves's types, the ones who think ends justify means, but it also means you can be the voice in the room saying, not like this, not at this cost. It was tempting, more than tempting. A chance to honor her father's legacy by preventing other families from experiencing what she had. Other soldiers from being used as chess pieces in games they didn't understand. What about Reeves? Will I have to work with him? He'll be around, but neutered. His direct operational authority is gone. You'd be under different chain of command people who actually give a damn about accountability. Garrett paused. Fair warning, though, he'll try to rebuild his influence. Men like him always do. Having you in the organization advocating against his methods will make you a target. Let him come. I'm done being afraid of Marcus Reeves. That's what I hoped you'd say. Garrett extended his hand. Welcome to the Team Thorn. Kate shook it, feeling the rightness of the choice. Not revenge, not continuing cycles of manipulation, but building something better. Teaching the next generation to ask the hard questions, to value people over objectives, to choose honor over expedience. What her father would have wanted. As they walked back toward the cemetery entrance, Garrett spoke again. One more thing. There's been chatter about a former Soviet nuclear scientist operating out of Kazakhstan, possibly connected to Volkov's network. Intelligence assets have flagged it as worth investigating. Kate stopped. And Command is assembling a deep cover team, small maximum deniability, complete operational freedom. Off the books, but with full backing if things go sideways. He pulled out a secure tablet, showed her surveillance photos. This was taken 3 days ago in Geneva, private banking facility. The image showed an elderly man in an expensive suit, his face partially obscured but still recognizable. Marcus Reeves. He's meeting with people connected to the Kazakhstan operation, Garrett continued. Russian ex-intelligence, private military contractors, all off the books, all highly suspicious. Kate studied the photo, feeling the familiar pull of operational necessity warring with hard-won wisdom. He's continuing the game, can't let go of the hunt. That's our assessment. Question is what to do about it. Kate thought about Volkov, about the nuclear device, about Reeves' obsession with finishing what he'd started 3 decades ago. The game never ended for men like him. There was always another threat, another target, another justification for crossing lines. What are you asking me, Garrett? Command wants someone to run surveillance on Reeves. Figure out what he's planning, whether it's a legitimate operation or another off-books vendetta. Someone who knows how he thinks, how he operates. Garrett met her eyes. Someone he trained personally. The irony wasn't lost on Kate. Reeves had spent 27 years creating her as a weapon to point at his enemies. Now she was being asked to point that weapon back at him. When do I start? Are you sure this could get complicated fast? Reeves is still connected, still dangerous. Kate looked back at her father's grave at the words carved in stone. He never left anyone behind. I'm sure, because this time I'm not doing it for revenge or missions or larger objectives. I'm doing it to make sure no one else gets used the way I was, the way Dalton's team was, the way my father was. Garrett nodded slowly. Then we move forward. Full briefing at Quantico tomorrow morning. Bring your A-game, Thorne. This won't be easy. The worthwhile things never are. After Garrett left, Kate returned to her father's grave. She pulled the compass from her pocket, the one Wyatt had carried on every mission, the one Reeves had given her, with its inscription about finding true north. She set it on the headstone, a symbolic gesture. I don't need this anymore, Dad, she said quietly. You taught me everything I needed to know. Not through videos or secondhand stories, but through the choices you made, the men you saved, the honor you died for. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the cemetery. Reeves spent 3 decades trying to convince me you failed, that choosing your team over the mission was weakness. Kate's voice caught slightly. But standing here now, knowing what I know, you were the strongest person I've ever heard of. Because you valued human life over human victory. Because you understood that we don't measure success by objectives completed, but by the people we refuse to sacrifice. She straightened, military bearing automatic. I'm going after him, Dad, not for revenge, not to finish his mission, but to make sure he can't do to anyone else what he did to you, to me, to all those SEALs he used and discarded. The compass needle spun slowly in the wind, seeking magnetic north. But Kate didn't need it anymore. She'd found her true north in her father's choice, in Dalton's integrity and the courage to value honor over orders. She saluted the headstone, held it for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the future. Behind her, the compass remained on the grave, its inscription catching the autumn light. Find true north always. Mission accomplished, Dad. Mission accomplished. 3 months later, Northern Virginia Training Facility. The shooting range deep beneath Naval Intelligence Headquarters smelled of gun oil and determination. Kate moved between stations where a mixed group of Navy SEALs, Army Delta operators, and CIA paramilitary officers completed a complex firing course. Precision matters more than strength, she instructed, adjusting one operator's stance. Control your breathing. Find the space between heartbeats. That's where the shot lives. Her father's words, refined through her own experience, passed to a new generation. One of the senior instructors approached, a familiar face now sporting instructor tabs. Mike Torres, the SEAL who'd defended her in the ravine. Ma'am, got a question from the new guys about... He paused, grinned. Actually, they just want to know if the stories are true. About the Ridge, the 31 kills. Kate met his eyes. What do you tell them? That I was there, that you saved our asses, that your old man would have done the same thing. Torres straightened. And that's the standard we hold here. Mission matters, but the man next to you matters more. He saluted and walked away, leaving Kate with a tightness in her throat. At the far end of the range, a door opened. Kate sensed the presence before seeing the visitor, a sixth sense developed through years of training and recent hard lessons. Garrett Dalton approached, his expression suggesting this wasn't a social call. Need a moment, Thorne. They moved to a soundproofed briefing alcove, secure from observation or eavesdropping. The Kazakhstan situation has escalated, Garrett said without preamble. Reeves made contact with the nuclear scientist we've been tracking. We have intercepts suggesting he's trying to arrange a black market purchase of weapons-grade plutonium. Kate felt ice settle in her stomach. For what purpose? Unknown. But given his history, his obsession with completing operations at any cost. Garrett paused. We need to know if this is sanctioned activity or if Reeves has gone completely rogue. And you want me to find out. Command has authorized a deep cover operation. Small team complete deniability. You'd lead it. He handed her a secure tablet displaying operational details. Codename Silent Sentinel. Kate studied the briefing materials, her tactical mind already processing approaches, risks, contingencies. This was different from Kingfisher. This time she'd have full operational control, real intelligence, a team she could trust. Who else is on the team? Your choice. Pull from any service branch, any specialty. Command has given you carte blanche to assemble whoever you need. Kate looked up from the tablet. And if I discover Reeves is running an unauthorized operation, if he's compromised or pursuing personal agendas over national security, then you stop him, whatever that requires. The weight of it settled on her shoulders. Not revenge, not completing Reeves's missions or continuing his games, but accountability, making sure the system she'd sworn to serve actually served the people it was meant to protect. I'll need time to assemble the team, run deep background checks, verify loyalties. You have 72 hours after that. Reeves leaves Geneva and we lose our chance to track him. Garrett's expression was grave. I know what I'm asking, Kate. Hunting your godfather, the man who raised you, who shaped everything you became, if you want to pass on this. No. Kate's voice was firm. This is exactly the kind of mission I need to run, because I understand him better than anyone. I know how he thinks, how he operates, what lines he'll cross. And you're prepared to stop him if necessary. Kate thought about her father dying to save his team, about Dalton's SEALs used as bait in a trap, about all the people Marcus Reeves had sacrificed on the altar of mission success. I'm prepared to do what's right, whatever that looks like. Garrett studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Briefing at Quantico 0800 tomorrow. Bring your team roster. We move fast after that. After he left, Kate returned to the range. The operators were completing their course, their shots echoing in the enclosed space. Each one represented a choice to hit or miss, to kill or spare, to complete objectives or preserve lives. The choices that defined who they were. One of the younger operators approached a woman in her mid-20s with the lean build of a distance runner. Ma'am, question about the stress course. You said earlier that chaos is when training becomes instinct. But what happens when your instincts conflict with your orders? Kate considered the question, thought about Volkov's plateau and Reeves' manipulation and her father's final choice. Then you have to decide what kind of operator you want to be, she said finally. The kind who follows orders without question, or the kind who asks whether the orders are worth following. Both have their place, both serve necessary functions, but only one will let you sleep at night. The operator nodded, slowly processing the answer. Kate dismissed the class, then stood alone in the empty range. The targets downrange were pristine, untouched, waiting for someone to test their skills against paper enemies that couldn't shoot back. Real enemies were more complicated. Real choices had consequences that echoed for decades. She pulled out a small package that had arrived that morning. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting on the shipping label. Inside was a single item, a Navy SEAL trident mounted on a simple wooden plaque. Beneath it, a brass plate with an inscription to Kira Thorne. Your father's daughter, the legacy continues, no signature. But Kate didn't need one to know who'd sent it. Marcus Reeves, acknowledging her choice, respecting her independence, perhaps even approving of the path she'd chosen despite it leading her away from his control. Or maybe, and this thought sent chills down her spine, it was a test. One more manipulation, one more play in the endless game. Either way, Kate's response would be the same. She'd face him as herself, not as the weapon he'd designed. Would complete her mission according to her own moral compass, not his calculations. Would honor her father's legacy by choosing people over objectives, honor over victory, truth over expedience. Tomorrow she'd hunt Marcus Reeves, not for revenge, not to finish his missions or vindicate his methods, but to ensure that the game he'd played with people's lives The sacrifices he'd deemed acceptable, the lies he'd told in service of larger truths, that all of it would finally face accountability. She was her father's daughter, the guardian no one saw coming. The silent sentinel watching from the shadows, ready to protect. Not just missions and objectives, but the honor and dignity of the people who served. Kate Thorne placed the trident on her desk next to her father's photograph and the medals she'd earned through blood and choice. The legacy continued, but this time on her terms, this time pointing true north. The hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and second chances. Kate found Cole Brennan in recovery, his torso wrapped in bandages, monitors beeping steadily beside his bed. He looked smaller without his tactical gear, more human. The young operator who'd called her porcelain, who'd nearly died because of a mission built on lies. His eyes opened as she approached. Recognition flickered, followed by a weak smile. "Thorne, wasn't sure I'd see you again." "Had to make sure you were still kicking, Brennan." Kate pulled up a chair. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by an RPG." He winced, trying to shift position. "Oh, wait, I did. Doctors say I lost my spleen, had some internal bleeding, but they patched me up." "Prognosis is good." "That's good to hear." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two warriors who'd survived something most people couldn't comprehend. "Torres told me what you did," Brennan said finally. "Coming back to the valley when you could have stayed gone, choosing us over the mission." He met her eyes. "Guess I owe you one. Maybe don't call you porcelain anymore." "You stopped calling me that months ago, Brennan." "Yeah, but now I really mean it." His smile faded slightly. "They told us the truth. About Reeves, about the setup, about your dad." He paused. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice, coming back. Your old man would be proud." Kate felt her throat tighten. "Thank you." "No thank you. For saving our asses on that ridge." Brennan's expression grew serious. "What happens now to you, I mean, after going against Reeves? Now I make sure it doesn't happen again. To anyone." Brennan nodded, understanding passing between them. "If you ever need backup on that mission, you know where to find me. Once I'm healed up." Kate stood, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Focus on getting better first, Brennan. The fight will still be there when you're ready." As she left his room, Kate felt something settle inside her. Brennan would recover. The SEALs would remember what happened in that valley. And the truth, messy, complicated, painful, would finally see the light of day. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. The conference room was austere, designed for secrets that would never leave its wall. Kate sat across from Deputy Director Thomas Reynolds and two other senior intelligence officials whose names she hadn't been given. "Miss Thorne," Reynolds began, his voice carefully neutral, "your actions during Operation Kingfisher have created complications. I told the truth about a compromised mission, sir. Saved 24 American lives. I'd call that success. Colonel Reeves' operation successfully recovered a Soviet nuclear device that would have devastated Manhattan. That's also success." Reynolds leaned forward. "The question is whether your decision to reveal classified operational details to Captain Dalton constituted a breach of protocol." "The protocol was built on lies, sir. The SEALs deserved to know they were being used as bait." One of the unnamed officials spoke up, her tone sharp. "That's not your call to make, Miss Thorne. Chain of command exists for a reason. Chain of command also exists to prevent officers from sacrificing their men for personal vendettas." Kate shot back. "Panama, Somalia, now Afghanistan. How many times does Colonel Reeves get to play God before someone says enough?" Reynolds held up a hand, forestalling further argument. "The device has been secured. Volkov is eliminated. The Kazakhstan network is under investigation." He paused. "But you're right about one thing. Reeves's methods require oversight, which is why we're implementing new protocols for joint operations. With respect, sir, protocols mean nothing if they're not enforced. Which is why you're being offered a position." Reynolds slid a folder across the table. "Training and operational support for Special Operations Forces. You design and implement new intelligence verification systems. Make sure another Kingfisher doesn't happen." Kate opened the folder, scanned the details. It was everything Garrett had described and more. Authority, resources, the power to actually change how the game was played. And if I discover another Reeves, someone running unauthorized operations, then you report it through proper channels, and we investigate. Reynolds' expression hardened. But make no mistake, Miss Thorne, this isn't carte blanche to wage war against the intelligence community. You work within the system to fix the system. Understood. Kate thought about her father, about the choice between following orders and doing what was right, about the fine line between accountability and revenge. Understood, sir. When do I start? Immediately. Reynolds stood, extending his hand. Welcome to the team, Miss Thorne. Your father would be proud of what you've accomplished. Kate shook his hand, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a familiar coat. I hope so, sir. I really do. Kate sat alone in her sparse apartment, the city lights of Arlington visible through her window. On her desk sat 3 items: her father's photograph, the compass she'd retrieved from his grave, and the seal Trident Reeves had sent. She picked up the compass, opened it. The inscription stared back at her, familiar now as her own heartbeat: find true north always. Tomorrow she'd begin hunting Marcus Reeves, would walk the razor's edge between justice and vengeance, between duty and honor, would try to build something better from the ashes of broken trust. But tonight she allowed herself a moment of peace. Her phone buzzed. A text from Torres' new recruits asking about the guardian angel of Korengal Valley. Should I tell them the story? Kate smiled, typed back. Tell them the truth. All of it. Even the parts that hurt, because that was the only way forward. Not through carefully constructed myths or convenient lies, but through messy, complicated truth. Her father had understood that, had died for it. Now it was her turn to carry that legacy forward. Kate closed the compass, set it beside her father's photograph. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new impossible choices, new tests of who she was and what she stood for. But tonight she knew her true north. Not the one Marcus Reeves had tried to program into her, not the one defined by missions and objectives and acceptable losses, but the one her father had died believing in, that honor mattered more than victory, that people mattered more than plans, and that some prices were too high to pay no matter what you bought with them. Kate Thorne stood, moved to her window, looked out at the city she'd sworn to protect. Somewhere out there, Marcus Reeves was playing his next game, and somewhere out there, the next generation of warriors was learning that following orders and doing what was right weren't always the same thing. The legacy continued. Her father's daughter standing watch, the silent sentinel ready for whatever came next.